Hey, so good morning, everyone. Welcome again to our OpenDaylight best practice talk. So yeah, we're gonna show you what are the OpenDaylight best practices, and we're gonna give you many links and pointers to where you could find help when needed. So first, we're gonna present ourselves.
Yep. So I'm Stephen Kitt. I work for Red Hat.
And I'm Alexis de Talhouet, and I work for Inocybe Technologies. So today we're going to cover pretty much many different things, but starting from where the first time you're going to go in OpenDaylight and try to work on it, what are the main questions you can encounter, until the end, at the end of the day, where you want to submit a patch and get it reviewed. So the whole process from beginning to end, this is pretty much what we're going to cover today. Yeah, so at first, what are the questions you can encounter when you come working in ODL? So so we have a list of questions listed here, but right after, we're going to give some answers and provide pointers. But first, by a show of hand, how many of you know OpenDaylight, or have worked or contribute to OpenDaylight code-wise? Oh, okay. Well, I'd say like 20%.
And how many would like to, but don't yet?
All right. So hopefully this talk is going to help you on board, and it's going to lower the barrier. So yeah, first OpenDaylight, what it is, it's I'm going to let you go ahead for the first one.
All right. Okay. So yeah, what OpenDaylight is, we'll actually cover that a bit later. If you're interested in coding for OpenDaylight, what do you need to know? Well, obviously networking, we've sort of skipped that part. On the coding side, you'll need to know Java, definitely, and it's helpful if you know a bit about Maven and OSGI and code review using Gerrit, and we'll come back to that later. What do you need to know to actually submit patches? Well, that's Git and Gerrit, but we've got documentation on the wiki that'll help you to do that.
But I believe folks here are aware of Git and how it works, pretty much. Yeah, all right, because that's, the real basic for OpenDaylight. Yeah, so next question is how to write a proper commit message. So now that you're aware of the skills you need to have, then it's, when you want to push a patch, the best practice to create a commit message. So it's easy to track down the work being done. So you start with, the first line is a brief description, maximum 50 characters. And then you add a blank line and an explanation. I'm not going to go through them precisely, but yeah, what you want to cover in the explanation of the Gerrit message is what and why you're pushing such a patch, and why it is, what it is solving, and why do we need to solve that, I guess.
Yeah, and go and have a look at the link there. You'll be able to download the slides from the Summit website. And if you don't read what's on the link there, Tan will probably pester you about it one day or other. So once you've submitted your patch and you've written your Git commit message nicely, how do you actually get reviews on your patch? Because for your patch to be merged, you need somebody to look at it and agree that it's a good thing and that it's okay. And so you submit your patch using Gerrit, and then once that's done, our infrastructure will build your patch and tell you if that's worked or not. And then to get human reviewers on it, the best approach is to go and have a look at the project list, find the project that you're committing, that you're pushing a change to, and look for the contact people there, committers or contact person, and add them explicitly to your Gerrit. So I mentioned that the infrastructure builds your patch. If it fails, then you'll get a -1 from Jenkins, our butler, and you'll get links. You'll get an email message from Jenkins with links to the build logs, and so you'll be able to figure out hopefully what went wrong and what you need to fix in your patch, so that you can resubmit it and get a passing build.
Yeah, how many people get a failed build by pushing a patch? It's pretty common, so that's, yeah, you need to know how to debug that. Oh yeah, and so now the infrastructure of OpenDaylight is providing us tools to basically play with some work you want to do and make sure that the work you want to do is actually working. So to test that, you can use the sandbox. This is pretty much where you can say, I want to build that project using that set of patches, and that way you're going to be able to test your patches and run some continuous integration job on those patches to make sure there is no regression or things like that. So it's pretty interesting when you're committing change across the whole project. That's really something that is recommended to go to and to play with.
Yeah, and another question you might be asked as well is, does this pass CSIT? Mostly for more complicated patches or riskier patches. And that's a set of more complicated tests that we run. To do that, you just type in test integration into the reply box in Jenkins. And that's one of several different templates that we can have, and you'll find the list up there. So you can run a variety of different tests on your patches just to make sure that everything is going okay before it merges and breaks everything.
Yeah, exactly. And to close the parenthesis on that is there are many keywords that you can use to recheck or revalidate patches and things like that. But I mean, before using them, and those are listed in the wiki page that we, yeah, in the second wiki page, the template. This is where you would find those keywords. But at first, if your build is failing, you want to check out the logs because it might be, coding error instead of infrastructure error. Okay, anyway, so now how my project should look like and how should it be structured. So we're trying to get common structure or POM layout across all OpenDaylight project. So when you jump from a project to another, you're not completely lost and it's still making sense for you. And for that, so the first thing you can use if you want to create a new project is use the OpenDaylight archetype. It's going to generate for you the whole scaffolding for a project, and it's going to provide you, from the API to the implementation to the CLI and everything you need basically to create an application. Some of you here have used the archetype. Okay, yeah, so not that much. But if you want to create an OpenDaylight application, I really advise to use it. So that's the first link, if you need to do that. The second one is regarding the POM parent and the project layout. So the project layout is all the different bundle your application requires. Some of them are actually different in the sense that some of them might be just doing, defining some APIs, whereas some others might define the implementation, or some others might just be, creating the features because, it's Karaf base. Anyhow, so for each of those bundles, there are a given parent that it is recommended to use because it will provide everything you need basically to make it work easily and without having to go in too much the specific of what is required. So basically you just use the right parent, put your dependency, and you're all set. That's what the parent POMs and the project POM layout is, or should provide at least.
And it also means that if you do use these parent POMs, as we improve them, your projects benefit from the improvements automatically as well. So what should your code actually look like? So we've covered the project layout. Now into the details of the code, we've got a number of checkstyle rules that are used to provide a uniform code style. You don't have to use them in your projects, but we do like it when you do. So some of the rules are your Java imports are supposed to be in alphabetical order. You must list them all without collapsing any. You use spaces, not tabs, so that's that fight settled once and for all. You mustn't have trailing spaces, and Git will tell you about that as well as checkstyle. And all the rules are detailed on the wiki page that's linked there. Another rule we've got is for naming schemes. So this is not in Java, but in the OSGI world. You name your features, ODL project your functionality. So that's really up to you. How you name your functionalities and also how you split things up. And then your bundles inside your features, you call them project-functionality. And if OSGI isn't familiar to you, that won't mean all that much, but you can read up. You can read about it up on the wiki page there, and talk to us as well.
Yes, and again, everything we're mentioning right now. So if you get the slides, you will get all the links to the wiki pages or to where you could find this information. So now, yes, OpenDaylight within its infrastructure is providing Sonar. Sonar is basically a static analysis of your code base. So you would like to go and check the Sonar report to see, for instance, the technical depth of your code, or find some issues that you wouldn't spot yourself. So it's pretty handy when you want to do some cleanup and reduce the technical depth of your code.
Another aspect of coding styles is Java docs. And so if you look at the existing code base, you shouldn't use that as an example because we don't have very much Java docs, but going forward, we would prefer it if new code did have nice Java docs. And what's important there is the what and the why and how to use it, not the details of how you're implementing it, because we can read that in the code. And if you write it in your Java docs, the first time something changes, it'll be out of date. But most importantly, how to use it and why people would want to use your stuff. And in Boron, there's been a fair amount of work done on automating Javadoc production. And so we now have a nice website where all this ends up, and it's easily readable, which should encourage you to write nice documentation because it's accessible now. And finally, yeah.
Is that fail on violation yet? I think it's like a requirement to document the public APIs anyway for Maven Central.
Yeah, it's a requirement, and I think you can tell checkstyle to enforce it and break your build if you don't. But you always need a human aspect because code analysis tools can't decide that your Javadoc's good. They can only see that it's there. Yeah.
I know that's been the concern, but I think that would be a good thing to enforce project-wide.
Yeah, with stable features perhaps. And finally, keep your code clean. So that's just very general, but we don't really have time to go into all that much detail. But try to keep your technical debt down, and ask for help if you need, guidelines on Java 8 best practices, stuff like that. So, speaking of which.
Yeah, speaking of which, now the best coding pattern and libraries to use in OpenDaylight. So I'm just going to go through the first three, or four. No, three, yeah. So those days, we're having some new, I would say, basic APIs and basic tools that if you are creating an application, an OpenDaylight application, you will have to use. The first one is the data tree change listener. So that's something new since last release, but now you have to use that data tree change listener instead of data change listener. But for those who doesn't know what I'm talking about, basically it's just the implementation that gets you the callbacks when there is a change in your model. Maybe what I just say is Chinese from some folks. If it's not, good. If it is there any clarification I can add to that? Else, yeah, so that's those three OpenDaylight internals are really when you get into the code, and those are the one that we advise you to use. The second one is so the abstract data broker test is instead of when you're writing tests for OpenDaylight, instead of mocking the whole MDSAL part of OpenDaylight, you can use this abstract data broker test interface that will provide you the data broker, so you can interact with it. I mean, it's going to be a tool provided as Mockito is providing the mock. I mean, MDSAL is providing abstract data broker that you can use the same way. So you shouldn't mock everything that is MDSAL transaction based.
So should I understand that now Mockito can be used to simulate broker?
No, Mockito is still doing what it does, but this abstract data broker test can simulate the broker.
Well, it actually uses a real in-memory store under the hood. So you actually use the real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the recording, the question was, can we use Mockito to do MDSAL tests more or less? And the answer is no. You should use abstract data broker test, which is a real implementation of the MDSAL, and so you can do real transactions and so on, and write your tests using that instead of mocking the MDSAL layer.
Why is that? What's the motivation behind that?
Well, I find you end up with cleaner tests, so we don't really have much time to go into all the details right now, but if you write tests with a non-mocked MDSAL, your tests will be closer to the real behavior that you'd get on the MDSAL and the real way you'd use the MDSAL. And so you're going to, instead of just sort of pretending things happen, which ends up not really testing much that's any use, you're going to do real transactions, have real listeners, etc. And so you end up with more useful tests, more maintainable tests. It's just better in the long run.
Yeah, because when you're mocking it the way you think
Yeah.
the real thing works, and they may have a different.
Yeah.
Right.
So Tom said there for the recording again, if you mock MDSAL, then you mock it according to your understanding of MDSAL, and so your tests check your assumptions on MDSAL and not the reality of MDSAL.
And I mean, as for instance, to do unit testing, you're using Mockito. The MDSAL is providing as Mockito. So it's a tool, you shouldn't mock it, you should just use it as is. And that's what is enabled by using that. Yeah.
But if you're interested, talk to us about it later because we're running out of time.
Yeah, and the last change that is occurring right now is regarding a blueprint, so moving blueprint to OpenDaylight, and Tom that talked previously created some extension actually, so we can use blueprint efficiently in OpenDaylight.
And we also provide, with the parent POMs that we talked about earlier, we provide a set of third-party upstreams that we encourage you to use instead of going and looking for your own. So these are JUnit and Mockito for tests. You'll also find PowerMock, but I'd encourage you not to use PowerMock. Guava and Apache Commons for all the library kind of stuff, Netty4, and the current list is linked there, and that'll be updated as it changes.
Regarding the coding pattern, so there are some wiki pages that are explaining everything, but the two I'm going to highlight here are the fine-grained login and the exception handling. You really want to check out those practices because that's what makes the log file consistent across all applications in OpenDaylight. So it helps a lot when you're debugging. I'm not jumping into them because we're almost done with the session and we still have many things to cover.
Yeah. So once you've got your change ready and it meets all the style guidelines and all the rest, how do you actually drive your changes in the project? So the first question to ask yourself is, does it impact only my project? And if it does, then well, as long as it works for you, then it's okay. If it touches other people, then you need to make sure that auto-release works, and so you'll get more details on the link there. Does it impact downstream consumers? Then there's a process for that you should read up about. We call it weather in OpenDaylight, and so you have to send an email, write some stuff up on a wiki page, so that everybody is aware that your change is coming, when it's going to happen, what the impact is going to be for them. And finally, deprecation info. If your change is removing or planning to remove some feature at some point, then you need to give 1 cycle's notice, basically. So when one OpenDaylight cycle, release cycle, you deprecate it and document the deprecation, tell people what to use instead, and then in the next release you can remove it.
And yeah, of course, you have to consider the release schedule because we have some well-defined milestones in which, for each of those milestones, there are some things that you should do for your project, and you really want to stay close to those milestones. So the global OpenDaylight project itself is going to behave correctly. I mean, if you start doing things out of the milestones that are defined, everything is going wrong, and some folks here can know that.
Can we drop in an RC?
So the ongoing large-scale work happening in OpenDaylight. So the first one is moving to Blueprint. So that's regarding the dependency injection. So previously we were using something called config system. But regardless what it is, now we're trying to go to Blueprint for many reasons. I'm not going to talk too much about it now, but there's going to have a talk about it if you want to know more. The second one is, so as I said earlier, data tree change listener. You have to be involved in the code to know what that means, but it's basically providing faster and more information when you get an event callback for a given event.
Are there design docs for these things?
Sorry?
Are there design docs that we can read as to how
yeah, so good question. That's what.
So there's excellent documentation for Blueprint. There used to be documentation for data tree change listener, but I haven't been able to find it. If we do, we'll update the slides.
Right, and for the last one, the cluster singleton. So basically, the links are the documentation. Yeah, and the cluster singleton is a new APIs that are provided since not much long ago, and it's basically to make your application cluster aware.
All right, and so one thing that you're going to find as you get into the OpenDaylight community is that you'll get help if you help others. And so if you're encountering issues with your changes, you'll get much better help from the community if you put in some effort to make things easier. So provide logs, use Karaf's diagnostic features, try to find a small scenario that reproduces the issues you're encountering. Actually go and file bugs, because too often people complain on IRC or on the mailing lists, but it's much more actionable if there's a bug behind it. Send email to the appropriate mailing list, and come and talk to us on IRC, because most of the time somebody will answer.
Yeah, so now that you know pretty much how to onboard on OpenDaylight, the way to contribute is first you need to create your own identity. So OpenDaylight is providing its own, I mean it's using WSO2, but regardless. So you can click on the first link and you get to register. Then you have to set up Gerrit. And finally, you can start hacking the code base. So those 3 links will guide you through that process. And yeah, also now that you're all set and you want to contribute, but you don't know what to contribute to, or you don't know what OpenDaylight is providing, so you should go to that link that is listing all the project, and there you'll have a link to every single project that OpenDaylight has, and it will provide you information about it. And if a project is interesting for you, then you can start sending mails and getting involved into it. Another one would be, you want to check out, so there are some websites that are listed here that can help you know more about a project, but you have also to check the meetings wiki page that will provide you all the information you want to know about where meetings are happening, when, and So when you want to get involved, you should show up at a meeting and say, hey, I want to get involved in your project. What can I do for you? And yep, thanks for being there at the session today. We'll have a picture of the ODL cookbook, so that's something that is going to help you leverage OpenDaylight. But anyhow, thanks very much.
Yeah. So I think we're out of time for questions, are we? Yeah. So, but if you feel free to grab us, if you see us, we'll be around. Ask us about anything you want.
Yeah, and the purpose of that talk is really to give you all the pointers. So now if you grab the slides, you should have everything you need. And if you don't, you can ping us. I mean, yeah.